Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Beruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Makkot, and we are on the very bottom of Daf Yud Dalet, Amud Bet, the last line. Amar, Rabba Barachana, Rabbi Yochanan. Today's Amud is being learned as a zchut for the Neshama V'Esther Bat Naftali Tzvi HaLevi. Neshama Shel Aver Aliyah Be'ezrat Hashem. It's a zchut for Yehuda ben Asher and Anael Bat Tziporah. Yimala Hashem et kol mish'alot libam letova Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Today's Amud has been dedicated for Refuah Shelema of Mordechai Avshin ben Shoshana Shahnaz, and for Refuah Shelema of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, that should have a full recovery. Refuah Shelema. Amen. This month's learnings of the community have graciously been sponsored by the Dayan family, by Kohen family, by Shea families. Should have an ultimate zchut for all of their families. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. So we are discussing the items that do or don't get malkut, and we started something fascinating yesterday. We all know that a lav hanitak la'aseh does not get malkut. A regular lav, when you have a don't do in the Torah that involves actual maaseh, that you physically have to transgress the lav, then normally you get malkut. We discuss about things that get karet versus things that get death penalties. The death penalty is off because you can't have two different punishments. Mishum risha'a achat velo mishum shte rishaot. That's why they are excluded. But the Mishnah paskins, of course, like Rabbi Akiva, that by karet, even though that he gets a heavenly punishment, so long as down here the only punishment is the malkut, you do give them the punishment. And then we mentioned another exception. The exception is if you have a lav in the Torah, and if you transgress the lav, the Torah has given a fix for it. It's coming to tell you, do the fix and don't get lashes. So therefore, a lav hanitak la'aseh, a lav that is fixed with another aseh, you don't get malkut. Examples. Lo totiru mimenu ad boker, v'hanotar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrofu. Do not leave over korbanot. For instance, korban Pesach. You're allowed to eat it the whole night. Well, midoraita, midrabanan, that's the first Mishnah in the Gemara in Masechet Brachot, that you could do it until Chatzot only. Hence, nowadays by Seder, you have people who try to have afikomen before halachic midnight, because that represents Korban Pesach, and Lechatchila, you should really, or by the time Lechatchila, midrabanan, you have to be finished Korban Pesach before midnight, but midoraita you have until morning. What happens if you have leftovers of Korban Pesach until the morning? You just transgressed lo taseh. Lo totiru, you have to finish it up until before morning. What happens if you did leave over until the morning? You transgressed a lo taseh. You transgressed a don't do. But the Torah says, okay, you can fix it by burning it. V'anotar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrofu. So that is coming to tell you that if the Torah gives a fix, you don't get lashes. Same thing with stealing. Don't steal. But if you stole, return the object. So that's a lav hanit. Everybody agrees that a lav hanitak la'aseh does not deserve malkut, does not get lashes. Okay? Now Rabbi Yochanan is going to introduce a slightly different version of a mix of a lo taseh and aseh. When you have on the same subject a don't do and a do. And then we're going to be, for the entire next Amud, busy with trying to clarify exactly how to wrap our head around the different variations of a mix of a don't do and a do. The example is what we started yesterday, which is the reason that this really deviates to this subject. Don't come to Mikdash when you're Tameh, right? You're not allowed to come to the Makom HaMikdash, to the Machaneh HaShechina, when you're impure. But there's also an asay involved with it. What does it say? Vayeshalechu kol sarua vechol zav. Every person that becomes tameh, you have to send them out of the machaneh. So what's the difference? You have a lav and asay talking about an impure person entering the machaneh shechina, entering the makom hamikdash. The difference is, over here, the asay is before the lav. If you become tameh, get out of the machaneh. If you come to mikdash, cut it. So there's a lav, there's a asay, but the orders are reversed. Do I get malkut or do I not get malkut? That would be the question. So let's read what Rabbi Yochanan is going to say, and we'll discuss how the Rishonim understand this. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, one of the main students of Rabbi Yochanan was Rabba bar bar Chana. So Rabba bar Chana said, directly in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, we have said this before, that whenever you have in Gemara, Amar Peloni, like two words, see, Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. That's a direct quote. That means I was there when he said it, I heard it from him, directly. But sometimes you have so-and-so said in the name of Beshem Rabbi Yochanan. That means I wasn't there, I didn't hear it myself. But I heard in his name, somebody told me that somebody said that Rabbi Yochanan said. That's an indirect quote. So here is direct. Most of the time, Rabbi Yochanan is saying it directly in the name of Rabbi Yochanan because he was one of the main disciples of Rabbi Yochanan. So what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Kol lo ta'aseh shkdamase. Any don't do, any negative mitzvah, that prior to it has been a mitzvat aseh, lokin alav, you do get malkut. You do get malkut. Now, what does this exactly mean? The Ritba, the Rashi, they understand that it has to be chronologically also mentioned before in the Torah. But the Tosafot have their problems with that. And the Tosafot explain it has nothing to do with chronology. So what does it mean, a lav shkedamo aseh, a lav that aseh is before it? I mean, if it's not chronology, what is it? So Tosafot says something very interesting, which is very, very much logical. Says the Tosafot, is it independent or is it not independent? That's what it matters. For instance, a love of stealing and the assay of fixing it by returning a stolen object. Can I return a stolen object without stealing? No. Okay. You first have to steal in order to return the stolen object. I'm not suggesting you should do that, right? But you don't have the assay without the lav. If you haven't transgressed the lav, you don't have the assay. You can't burn a korban if it's not notar. You only could burn a korban if you already have transgressed the timelines, you left it over. The moment it becomes notar, now you have a mitzvah of burning it. The assay is not independent. The assay only exists when you already have transgressed the lav. But a assay that has its own legs to stand on, that is lav shekdamo assay, is not lav hanitak laseh. For instance, the example we just mentioned. You become tameh, get out of the machaneh. Can you get out of the machaneh without going into the mikdash? Of course you can. Right? You're in Masechet Israel, Masechet Leviyah, whatever it is, go out. Depending on the level of the tum'ah, of course you have sarat, goes out of all three machanot. Others are different. But it has nothing to do directly with the lav. You could do the assay without having transgressed the lav. That, says the Tosafot, we call it lav shkdamo assay. Not that the chronology is that it's mentioned before the assay, but that it stands on its own. It doesn't need the lo taseh to exist. So Rabbi Yochanan said, by that case, this is no comparison to lav hanitak laseh, a lav that's fixed a don't do that's fixed with a positive mitzvah. So whereas everybody agrees that you do not get lashes for a lav hanita klase, over here you do get lashes for a lav that has an aseh attached to it, but the aseh stands alone. The aseh does not need the lot aseh. So says the Gemara, Amru lo, other students of Rabbi Yochanan, this is Bechai Chayuto Shel Rabbi Yochanan. This is when Rabbi Yochanan is still alive. So Rabbi Bar Chana comes to Bet Midrash, says, you know what I heard yesterday or last year or 10 years ago from Rabbi Yochanan? Let me teach you something Rabbi Yochanan said. If you have a lav shekedamo aseh, you do get lashes. So that people say, wow, gee, that's amazing. Then they went to verify it with Rabbi Yochanan. They went to Rabbi Yochanan and said, did you say this? He said, no. Like Rashi says, Chazar bo. No. Not that he said, I never said it. It's not true. So this, of course, stirs up the pot always. And it resulted into a very drastic reaction from Rabbah. So Amru lo, they told Rabbi Yochanan, Amrat, Amarta, you said such a thing. Amar lehula. Said, no, I don't. What are you talking about? And Rabbah jumps and swears. He says, no, you did say it, and it is mentioned in our Mishnah. It's not only that you said it, it is true, and it's mentioned in our Mishnah over here in Makkot, Daf Yudalit. Amar Rabbah, Ha'elokim Amara. That's a language of taking an oath. So I swear you said it. Uchtiva v'tanina. And it's a pasuk that on it, the Mishnah says that you do get Malkut. What is it? Ktiva, it says the pasuk, Vayishalechu mina machane, in regards to a person that becomes impure, becomes tameh, the pasuk says, Tzav el bnei Yisrael, command the Jews, Vayishalechu mina machane, they should send out of the machane, kol sarua v'chol zav v'chol tameh lan nafesh. Any person that is someone that has been inflicted by leprosy, we translate it like that, it's not really leprosy. Sarat, v'chol zav, v'chol tameh la nefesh. Any person that's tameh, whether it's sarat, zav, it has come in touch with tumat met, a corpse. Mizachar adekeva teshalechu el michus lamachane teshalechum v'lo yitameu et machanechem asher ani shocher betochem. That's the full pasuk from the side. So you send them out. That's an aseh, right? Now, the Ritba and Rashi will tell you this example is very befitting because it actually chronologically is mentioned before the other pasuk. Right? But according to Tosafot, again, it doesn't matter. It's just we need a standalone aseh versus those who need the lav to have the aseh, as we explained 5 minutes ago. So says the Gemara, V'tanina, and we have it, don't make your machane, your encampment tameh. And it says in our Mishnah of Makkot, Daf Yudalet fame, Habale mikdash tameh, that a person that enters the mikdash while being tameh, what happens to him? Gets malkut. That's one of the examples of our Mishnah. Right? One of the examples of our Mishnah in Daf Yud Gimal is a person hatameh sha'achal et hakodesh vehaba el hamikdash tameh. Right, the 6th line after the start of the perek. So a person that comes into the mikdash when he's tameh gets malkut, gets lashes. You have a aseh of sending them out of the machane. That's lav. Shkdamo aseh. You have a don't do associated with this issue. You have a positive mitzvah associated with this issue. And yet you still get malkut. So don't you tell me that Rabbi Yochanan did not say this. He said it, and it is actually halacha in the Mishnah in the beginning of the 3rd parak of Makkot. Amazing. That sounds pretty convincing. It's pretty good. So says the Gemara, So why does Rabbi Yochanan why does he deny having ever said this, or he was choser, he retracted his psak? Says the Gemara, Elamai tama kahadarbe. Why did Rabbi Yochanan retract his psak? He was choser. Mishum de kasha leonis. Because he held of this until he bumped into a massive question that doesn't fit the narrative. And therefore he retracted from his entire rule. What is the anomaly that made Rabbi Yochanan retract his psak? Is the sugya of me'anis. If a person forced a woman into a relationship, rape, the Torah says what? He has to marry her. He has to marry her. And you can't divorce her. And you have to also pay, and we'll get to details of it in just a moment, right? So what's the problem with that? Says the Gemara, ones is the problem. The Tanya, because we learned in the Braita, ones shegiresh, this person who raped a woman, and now he married her, because that's what you have to do. And now he divorced her. Now the pasuk says, "Lo yuchal l'shalecha kol yamav." You're not allowed to divorce her. Well, you divorced her, right? So he went against the law. And the pasuk says you have to marry her. So you have asay, and you have a lav. This is lav shekdamo asay. The first thing the Torah says, you got to marry her. That's asay. That's a positive mitzvah. And then it says you can't divorce her. But you did. So you would expect that the person should get what? Malkut. Lashes. Should get malkut. According to Rabbi Yochanan, this guy should be deserving all the malkut in the world, right? And what's the halacha? Halacha is he doesn't get malkut. If he's a regular Jew, he just goes back under chuppah, marries her again, and they live happily ever after. That's the halacha. You don't give him lashes. If he's a Kohen, it's a different story. If he's a Kohen, he can't marry her again. Why? Because a Kohen cannot marry a divorcee. So he's stuck. So a Kohen would get lashes because he can't marry her. But if you could marry her and don't get lashes. But that doesn't seem to fit the narrative of if you transgress a don't do that has an assay before it, that you would get lashes. The Torah says you don't get lashes, just marry her back and you're good to go. That's the problem, Rabbi Yochanan. That is what did not fit the narrative, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan was choser from this fact that you will get lashes by lav shkdamo aseh. Right? Now the Gemara is going to go through this discussion and prove that that perhaps is not correct. So before we get into the mechanism of this example, where are we holding right now? Everybody in the world agrees that if you have lav hanitak laseh, you have a don't do, and then the Torah gives a fix for it. If you did transgress this don't do, fix it like this. Don't steal. If you stole, return it. Don't leave from the korban until the morning. If you did, burn it. Everyone agrees you don't get malkut. The question is, how about a lavan asay that are not quite like that? The asay stands alone, right? If you're tameh, exit the machane, exit the encampment. And if you came to the mikdash, then you get karet. Do you get malkut? Yes, you do. Right? So how do we put this together? Now, Rabbah had a phenomenal kasha on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbah says, wait, our case of a person that enters the mikdash is a prime example of lav shekedamo aseh, of a don't do that has a positive mitzvah attached to it. Get out of the machane. Don't come to mikdash. If you came to mikdash, then you get lashes. Seems to be that lav shekedamo aseh, you do get malkut for. But then Rabbi Yochanan has a good kasha. How do you deal with ones, with this guy that raped the girl? Right? If you rape, you have to marry her. You can't divorce her. Aseh, lo taseh. If you did the lo taseh, just marry her back. You don't get lashes. So something doesn't work over here. Now the Gemara is going to spend the rest of the Amud proving that perhaps our Mishnah is the principle. And the case of Rabbi Yochanan is actually not a lav shekedamo aseh, but rather it is your old good lav hanitak laseh. It is considered a lav that has a fix with a do. And that's why you don't get malkut. But really, Rabbi Yochanan's original psak was correct, that lav shekedamo aseh, you do get lashes. Example of someone that enters the mikdash while being tameh. Now, how do we go about this is going to be the mechanism that the Gemara is going to go back and forth to try to explain. So let's go through this again together. So says the Gemara, if this guy that raped the girl is a regular Jew, not a Kohen, he returns the girl and marries her again after having divorced her and doesn't get lashes. Amailo. Why not? Lo ta'aseh shtamo aseu. This is a lo ta'aseh that was preceded by an aseh. A don't do that was preceded by a do. Velilki. And he should get lashes. So that is the problem of Rabbi Yochanan. Ula says, no problem. I will answer it. Amar Ula. Lo yomar lo tiyeh leisha be'ones. Says, you know why? Because you didn't need to say that this person should marry her. When a person raped a girl, the Torah says, first step, marry her. Second step, you can never divorce her. Says Ula, you don't really need to say marry her. I would know that you must marry her. How do I know? From a different parasha in the Torah, very similar. What's the different parasha? If someone got married to a girl, and they go home, and tomorrow morning he comes to bed and he says, I got gypped. She was not a betula. This, the Torah says, is the parasha of Motzi Shemra. He slanders this girl, the Kala. Right? If the family of the Kala could prove that he's lying, he would get punished, and he would never be able to ever divorce this girl ever again. That's what's going to happen to Motzi Shemra, right? So says the Gemara, Ula, if he has to marry her, when he didn't do much, he just spoke. He didn't do any action wrong, he just spoke negatively. So for sure, the case of a rape, that he actually did something wrong, that he has to marry her. I would have known on my own. So therefore, says Ula, that pasuk is extra. Amar Ula lo yomar lo tiyeh leisha. You don't need to say by a case of rape that he should marry her. I would have learned it from the parasha of Motzi Shemra, the man that married and slandered his wife the day after. By the Motzi Shemra, even though that the guy didn't do anything, he just spoke negatively. And yet the Torah says he should be married to this woman eternally forever. Lo kol shken by ones. Ones, lo kol shken. The case of a rape that he actually did something wrong, very wrong, isn't it kal vachomer that he should also have the obligation to marry this woman and stay married forever? And therefore, says the Gemara, im eno inyan lefanav, tenahu inyan la'acharav. Therefore, I don't need to say by the case of rape, you should marry her. So why does the Torah say you should marry her? If you don't need it for the beginning, that right after the rape he should marry her? It's coming to tell you that if you divorced her, you have to marry her again. That's what it's coming to teach you. So if that's how we learn it, what is this going to be now? A lav hanitak la'aseh. It's going to be your old good lav hanitak la'aseh. Don't divorce her. And if you divorced her, marry her again. So of course you're not going to get lashes. So it says Ula, I will explain to you why you don't get lashes by the case of rape. You know why? Because the Torah, it's as though the Torah says, don't divorce her. And if you divorce her, marry her again. Which will be a lav hanitak la'aseh, which everybody agrees you don't get lashes. Right? So says the Gemara, very nice. Ula, you're saying amazing. But there's one massive issue over here. You cannot compare the case of Motzi Shemra, the guy that slanders his wife, with the case of rape. He can't. Says the Gemara, why not? V'akte ones mi Motzi Shemra lo gamar. You can't learn ones from Motzi Shemra. The ikal mifrach, because you have a massive elephant in the room question. A kasha. Ma'ale Motzi Shemra shken lokeu meshalim. You know what happens to Motzi Shemra? If someone marries a girl and tomorrow morning comes to Bedin and says she was not a betula, and then we prove him wrong, you know what happens to him? First, we give him a good beating, like he gets lashes. Second, he pays 100 kesef. Mea kesef he has to pay. Now, normally, I ask you a question. Normally in the Torah, does a person pay and get lashes? Never. This is the anomaly. It's such a bad thing he did that we give him lashes and he has to pay. And he has to stay married with her forever. We don't find lokeu meshalem in the whole Torah. And yet this has lokeu meshalem. So therefore, maybe this has a stringency that nothing else has, and you cannot learn kal vachomer from this to honest. You can't. Says the Gemara, Ella. So therefore, that's wrong. Ula was rejected. The Gemara gives it another try. Let's just finish with this. Ella lo yomar lo tiyeh leisha b'motzi shemra. He shouldn't say by motzi shemra. Now the Gemara switches. By the case of motzi shemra, the man that slanders his wife the day after the wedding, he shouldn't say lo tiyeh leisha, that he should marry her. Velikmor me'ones, and learn it from the ones, because it's the other way around. Kal vachomer. Uma ones she'eno lokeu meshalem. Say it like this: by ones, you don't get lashes and pay, right? And yet you have to marry her. So for sure, by Motzi Shemra, that you get lashes and you get to pay, that you should marry her. It should be kal vachomer. Amar Achmana velo tiyeh leisha Motzi Shemra lo kol shken. Shouldn't it be a kal vachomer for sure that he should marry her? Says the Gemara, V'lama ne'emar. Why does it say by a Motzi Shemra that you have to marry her? Im eno inyan leMotzi Shemra tenao inyan leones. If it's extra that you have to marry her and you don't need it for Motzi Shemra, give it to the case of ones, which is a parallel parasha, a parallel case in the Torah with Motzi Shemra. And if eno inyan lefanav, tenao inyan la'acharav. And of course, you don't need it beforehand because it says by ones beforehand that you have to marry her. So give that mitzvat aseh that you have to marry this girl to the case of ones after she was divorced. So it says the Gemara, it becomes equivalent of having two mitzvat aseh by the case of ones and one lav. If you raped a person, you have to marry her. Mitzvah number one. You can't divorce her, the lav, the don't do. And if you divorced her, you have to marry her, which we borrowed this from the case of Motzi Shemra because it wasn't needed there, right? So now becomes a lav hanitak la'aseh. Because you had one assay, one lav, and second assay. So forget about the first lav. It's the first assay. You have a lav hanitak la'aseh. and therefore you don't get lashes. That's the suggestion of the Gemara, to which the Gemara is going to also answer that this is not going to work, because however you slice it is going to have a problem, as we will see Be'ezrat Hashem in the days to come.